Okay, so we're continuing in our study of the book of Daniel, and we're in the middle of chapter 3, Perek Gimal. And we've been talking about, in this Perek, a story that actually doesn't involve Daniel. It's one of the few chapters in the book that doesn't revolve around the main character, Daniel, and actually revolves around the king of Bavel at the time, Nebuchadnezzar. And as we talked about last week, just to quickly review, Nebuchadnezzar, after having a dream about a statue that signified his power but that Hashem ultimately wins out, he creates kind of an answer to that. And his answer to that is a completely gold statue, which shows in his mind his real power and his real invincibility and his real immortality. And it's not only the statue that he creates and establishes, but rather that the statue is something that is to be bowed down to. And he creates set times and places or some kind of set procedure at the very least of when music plays, and the music is extensive, as everything that's described is large and grand and overstated and so on. So he says if there's any music playing, then everyone has to stop what they're doing and bow to the statue. And again, an enormous statue, and that's the message. Now, of course, as we said last time, three of the Judean advisors that he has that we met in chapter 1. Their names are Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. Each one of those refuses to bow down, but it seems like they're not doing it in such a demonstrable public way, but demonstrable and public enough that some people begin to talk about it, and they talk about it to the point that it gets brought back to Nebuchadnezzar, who goes into a rage. In all his desire for the grand, for the huge, for the exceptional, for the immortal. So there can't be anyone defying that. Anyone who defies that is an attack on him, and he takes it in the worst of ways. And he calls these three people that are his people. If you remember from chapter 1, he has a fellowship. And he is he creates this, that he's, kind of containing them and holding them. So here he goes. And he says as follows. It says, Nebuchadnezzar, and this is Pasuk 13, if you're following along in a book, Nebuchadnezzar in raging fury orders Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. Remember, those are Jewish people with Babylonian names assigned to them now that they work in the court. He orders them to be brought. And so Nebuchadnezzar spoke to them and said, and these men are brought before the king. Nebuchadnezzar speaks to them and says, "Is it true, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, that you do not serve my God or worship the statue of gold that I set up?" He asked them the question. He says, "Hey guys, is it true that you are not doing what you're supposed to? I set up this statue. I expect you to be bowing to the statue. You're not. Is it true that you're not bowing to the statue?" Like, he can't even believe it. Right? Now, if you are ready to fall down and worship the statue that I've made, when you hear the sound of the horn, pipe, zither, lyre, psaltery, and bagpipe, and all the other types of instruments, but if you will not worship, you shall at once be thrown into a burning fiery furnace. And what God is there that can save you from my power? So the king Nebuchadnezzar turns to these Judeans, these Jews, and he says to them, "Hey, is it true?" He says, "It can't be true." He says, "And if you know what? I'll give you an out now. The music's going to play, and you're going to bow down, and everything will be good, right? So like there's an out. If you didn't do it until," he doesn't say it this way, but if you didn't do it until now, okay, here's your chance. Just bow down to the bow down to the statue now when it's the right time, when the music starts playing. You'll do that, right, guys? You'll do it. That's what he's saying. So Shadrach and Meshach and Abednego said in reply to the king. So they respond, "O Nebuchadnezzar, we have no need to answer you in this matter. For if it could," remember, by the way, he says, Nebuchadnezzar says, "and if you don't do it, right, not only will you have made me upset," says the king, but I have to follow through on what I said I was going to do, which is to throw you into a fire. Right? I'll throw you into a furnace. So the choice is obvious. Bow down now. And they say to him, Nebuchadnezzar, we have no need to answer you in this matter. For if it must be so, if this is the way that you're going to leave it, that it's either bow or be thrown into the furnace, our God, whom we serve, is able to save us from the burning fiery furnace. Hashem could save us from the fire, and he will save us from your power, O king. But even if he does not, be it known to you, O king, that we will not serve your God or worship the statue of gold that you have set up. Listen, Hashem is powerful enough that he could save us from the fire. And he might, but he might not. But regardless, we still would rather be thrown into the fire than violate what Hashem wants of us. And he does not want us to bow to a statue. That's not something that Hashem wants. So that's the response that they give. They basically say, listen, we know the choice that you give us. We knew the choice beforehand. We didn't think you were joking around. And our answer is, look, we cannot bow to a statue. It's against what Hashem wants. And rather than go against what Hashem wants, we'll be thrown into a furnace. No problem. Maybe he'll save us. Maybe he won't. But we can't violate what Hashem wants of us. Nebuchadnezzar was so filled with rage at Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego that his visage was distorted, and he gave an order to heat up the furnace to 7 times its usual heat. Now, Nebuchadnezzar was upset before he spoke to them because he heard that they weren't listening to him. But when they were now not listening to him in his face, he became enraged. He couldn't control himself. And so what does he do? He says, I am going to light the furnace 7 times hotter than it normally would be. Meaning it's not bad enough that I'm going to throw them into a furnace and it's going to be hot and it's going to kill them. No, I'm going to make a show of this. I'm going to make sure that it gets so hot that it's 7 times hotter than it normally is. However, they do that. He commanded some of the strongest men of his army to bind Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego and to throw them into the burning fiery furnace. And so he takes might, power. He says, let me get the strongest, biggest guys to tie them, to grab them and take them and tie them up so we could throw them into the furnace. Again, everything that Nebuchadnezzar is doing is to show his strength, to show his power. It's what it's all about. He's saying, I am the most powerful, and there's nothing more powerful than me. That's his goal. And of course, when they refuse him, so that undercuts his power. That shows that he's not as powerful as he thinks, not only to himself, which is hard enough to determine, to accept, but to everybody else, right? So he's just going crazy. So what does he do? He says, these men in their shirts, trousers, hats, and other garments were bound and thrown into the fiery furnace. So he takes the 3 Jewish guys and he ties them up and he binds them and he's going to throw them into the furnace. Because the king's order was urgent and the furnace was heated to excess, a tongue of flame killed the men who carried up Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. So the fire is so big, so strong, and the king is being so aggressive and assertive about having them thrown into the fire, that what happens? As the king's men are throwing these 3 Judeans into this furnace, the fire leaps out, right? The fire is so big, so strong, so powerful that fire can't be contained. So the fire comes out and it burns the men who are throwing the Jews into the furnace, right? So these guys aren't intending to get burnt. They're just trying to throw people into the fire at the king's command. But the fire is so strong that they get burnt. And they get consumed because the fire is so powerful, the fire leaps out of the furnace and burns up the king's men. But those 3 men, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, dropped bound into the burning fiery furnace. And those guys get burnt up and consumed, the king's men. And the 3 Jews kind of just drop into the fire, right? So the people outside the fire get burnt and consumed, and the 3 Jews drop into the furnace. Okay, what happens next? Then King Nebuchadnezzar was astonished, and rising in haste, addressed his companions, saying, "Did we not throw 3 men bound into the fire? Didn't we just throw these guys in?" They spoke and replied, "Surely, O king." He answered, "But I see 4 men walking about unbound and unharmed in the fire, and the 4th looks like a divine being." So he sees that even though he threw them into the fire, it's not having the effect that he wanted. Instead of having 3 burnt Judeans, he has 4 figures walking around in the fire, the 3 Judeans, the 3 Jews, and 1 angel, some divine being. Nebuchadnezzar then approached the hatch of the burning fiery furnace and called. So now he goes to the door of the furnace and he says, "Shadrach, Meshach, Abednego, servants of the Most High God, come out." He says, "Come out of the fire." So Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego come out of the fire. The satraps, the prefects, the governors, and the royal companions, all the king's men, gathered around to look at those men on whose bodies the fire had no effect, the hair of whose heads had not been singed, whose shirts looked no different, to whom not even the odor of fire clung. An amazing miracle, right? These 3 Jews have no effect of being in this fiery furnace. Remember the furnace that burnt the Babylonians who threw them into the furnace, but they themselves come out with no effect, no fire, they themselves are not burnt, their hair is not burned, their clothing remains the same. They don't even smell. I mean, if you're in a fire, you would smell. They don't even smell of the fire. Nebuchadnezzar speaks up and says, "Blessed be the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, who sent his angel to save his servants, who, trusting in him, flouted the king's decree at the risk of their lives, rather than serve or worship any god but their own God." So Nebuchadnezzar says, wow, their God is real. Their God must be true, because look at what happened. No one could deny what they're seeing. It's truth. And their God is the true God. He's the great God. Wow, amazing. "I hereby give an order," Nebuchadnezzar makes a decree now, "that anyone of any people or nation of whatever language who blasphemes the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego shall be torn limb from limb, and his house be confiscated, for there is no other God who is able to save in this way." Nebuchadnezzar says, anyone who says anything bad about Hashem, I say that they will be torn from limb to limb, and their houses, their property will be confiscated. So he's completely in acceptance of Hashem. Now remember, this is the 2nd time, or maybe even the 3rd time, that he's accepting Hashem, because the first time was that the Jews didn't eat his food and looked better. The 2nd time was the Jew was able to tell what his dream was when no one else was able to. But now this is amazing, because this is directly speaking to his power, and his power is overcome by the power of Hashem. So he now makes a very strong decree that anyone that goes against Hashem, he's going to take care of. He's going to rip from limb to limb. Thereupon the king promoted Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego in the province of Babylon. Now he elevates these 3 gentlemen, these 3 Judeans, and he makes them higher in the eyes of people. He promotes them in Babel. "King Nebuchadnezzar, to all people and nations of every language that inhabit the earth, may your well-being abound." He says, I'm speaking to everyone. "The signs and wonders that the Most High God has worked for me, I am pleased to relate." I'm telling you about what Hashem did, the miracles and wonders. "How great are his signs, how mighty are his wonders. His kingdom is an everlasting kingdom, and his dominion endures throughout the generations." So basically, Nebuchadnezzar accepts Hashem, and Hashem is the all-powerful, and he tells everyone about it. And that's the end of chapter 3, and that's the end of the story that we have here of Nebuchadnezzar's golden statue and the Jews' refusal to bow down to it, and the furnace that they're thrown in and saved from. Right? That's the message of the story. So the question that we have is this something? I mean, the story is amazing, right? Because you have here a story that involves what we call Kiddush Hashem, right? And actually probably the first story of Kiddush Hashem, because Kiddush Hashem means to stand up for Hashem, even if it costs you your life. right? And that's the Kiddush Hashem that happens here, is these three Judeans, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, are told, bow down to this idol. And they know if they bow down to that idol, that's Avodah Zarah, and you can't do Avodah Zarah under any circumstance. In fact, we know the halacha is that there's three sins that if someone puts a gun to your head, right, you still say, I will not do that sin. I will make sure I don't do the sin even by punishment of death. And those three sins are Avodah Zarah, like we have here, Gilui Arayot, incest, or murder, right, killing another person. If someone tells you for any of those sins, do the sin or I'll kill you, you have to say, I can't do the sin. If you have to kill me, you have to kill me, but I can't do that sin. And actually, this is the first recorded case that we see of someone who gets put in that position. And in fact, we learned from this that Rambam kind of quotes this in his halacha when he teaches this, and the Gemara talks about it as well. So we see that this is kind of a model for things that are going to happen in the future, right? And we know that it does happen in the future. There are many, many times after this in recorded history where Jews are told, violate the law, go against Hashem, betray your Judaism, or else you will be killed. And in many of those instances, the Jews followed the example of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, and they said, okay, we can't violate our Judaism in that way. You'll have to kill us. There are a number of examples. So for example, at the time of Hanukkah, in the book of Maccabees, there are a number of examples of people that were told to bow down to idols, and they would not, and they were put to death. And we know other situations throughout history where Jews are told to do certain things that violate their religion, and they're out, and they are knocked out. Getting back to the point that we have here. So this story is an incredible story in the sense of how far some people will be willing to go in order to keep the Torah and the mitzvot. And we hope we would never be put in this type of situation. But in fact, the halacha, and that's recorded a halacha in the Gemara and in the Rambam, is that in certain situations, not in every situation, but in certain situations, a Jewish person must give up their life in order to not violate a particular sin. And even if it means, we know the non-Jew is saying to us, do this in order to or I will kill you, we have to not do it. It's a tough one, but it's an important one. Now, what's interesting is, in this story, there's a little bit taken off it in the sense that they get saved, right? Because in this story, it's they get thrown into a furnace, but they don't get killed. A miracle happens, but the miracle almost takes away from the point, right? Because the point is that they were willing to do it even if there was no miracle. When the king says, hey, I'm going to throw you into a fire, bow down or else, they say, listen, we're not going to bow down. Could be Hashem's going to save us, but could be he's not. And we're prepared either way, right? And that's the real key moment of the story. The fact that they get saved is great, and it's great for them, and it's great for the situation, and it's great to send the message that Hashem could do whatever it is that he wants to do, but not in every situation is that going to happen. Sometimes someone's going to say to a person, I'm going to shoot you if you don't do this, and they're going to shoot you, and the person's going to die, right? And it's still the right thing to do. And that's evidenced in the story, because they do say, hey, we'll do this no matter what. We'll do this no matter what. But unfortunately, or fortunately in this case, they do get saved, because Hashem's goal, as we've seen, is not only to teach us what the right thing to do, but it seems like he's very invested in sending a message to Nebuchadnezzar. He, as we mentioned last week, Nebuchadnezzar, Hashem sees him as his tool, his instrument in getting certain things done. And it seems like he wants to show Nebuchadnezzar, and by extension, everybody else, that, hey, what Nebuchadnezzar was able to accomplish, he accomplished because I, Hashem, allowed him to accomplish it. And that's an important message that he gives through this story is Nebuchadnezzar, you think you're powerful, but you're not really powerful. Everything you try and do gets undercut, right? You think you're going to make a decree and you're going to have this gold statue that everyone's going to say, wow. But look, I'm going to show you that not everyone's going to say wow. And once one person or three people don't say wow, it undercuts your whole objective of showing how strong you are. And you think you're going to make it work out because you'll kill them. And then when you kill them, you'll establish, hey, if you don't bow down to me, look at what happens. You get thrown into the fire. I'm the man. I'm the most powerful person. That's what you think you're going to say, Nebuchadnezzar. But that's not going to work. And you're going to get enraged. You're going to use your anger. And your anger is just a sign of how desperate you are because you don't really have control. And you're going to try and show the control, but it's not going to work. And you're going to get the biggest, strongest men, and you're going to take the fire and you're going to light it, even though it's a furnace, so it's already hot, but you're going to light it 7 times more. Doesn't matter, right? Whatever you're going to do, Hashem could undercut that. And that's also part of the message here is Nebuchadnezzar, at the end, you're going to have to acknowledge the truth. And the truth is that Hashem is the most powerful, not you. And Nebuchadnezzar in the story, to his credit, ultimately does recognize it, ultimately does accept the truth, and does accept that Hashem is the one. It's a pretty amazing story in that regard, in that this powerful, and we might even say evil king, when it comes to facing the truth right in his face, he ultimately does accept it. He ultimately does say, okay, I accept Hashem is the king. Hashem hu Elohim, Hashem Elohim. He is the one. And of course, it's recorded in the Tanakh for us to say, hey, this may not happen this way every day, but it could. And it could be a part of what happens. So that's the message of this part of the story. The message of the, one of the messages of the book of Daniel is the need sometimes to be able to stand up and say, hey, we have to stand up for what's right, even if it costs us greatly. And that's a big message for the overall theme that we have in our class. And the theme of the class is, what does it mean to live as a Jew in a foreign land? We hope not often, but sometimes it means that you have to be willing sometimes to be all the time to sacrifice, but sometimes to make the ultimate sacrifice. And we hope that never comes about. And we're particularly thankful for living in America where it kind of never comes about. But this does come about sometimes, and it does come about in some places. And the message is we have to not fall prey to thinking that there's another power other than Hashem. The ultimate power is Hashem. And if he decides to save us, great. But if he doesn't decide to save us, then it's our responsibility, our duty to learn from this, that we have to go about it this way, and we have to be willing to sacrifice. And we're going to actually see as we go forward that this story plays itself out again in the book of Daniel. We're going to see it again where Daniel himself gets put in a situation where he has to decide, is he going to do the right thing or do what the government wants of him and put his life at risk, and see how that happens. It's a very famous story. We're going to come back to it in a future class. Anyway, that's where we're going to stop here for today. I know it's a little bit short, just a few minutes, but definitely time for any questions or anything like that. Any thoughts, comments, questions?
Adna also, didn't she lose 7 sons?
Yeah, that's the one that I mentioned before in the book of the Maccabim, where it talks about Hannah and her 7 sons, who each one, they try and get them to bow, and they don't. They learned from Daniel, right? Or from Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah. They learned from the book of Daniel, which comes first, right? This is the first story that we really ever see that someone has to do what Hashem says, or do what they know is the right thing, or be killed. And they said, so you can kill me, right? It's pretty much the first time that we ever see it, and they accept it, and it works out well for them. But as we know, it doesn't, for Hannah's sons, it doesn't work out well, right? They die, right? They get killed. And like I said, throughout Jewish history, there are plenty of situations where Jews have been killed rather than violate. No problem. Okay. Well, let's stop here for today unless there's any other
Thank
thoughts.
you. Very beautiful. We'll see you next week.
Thank you. Take care.